Jess was in full Cobra mood during the Casa recoupling, while Matilda, who knew? I mean, she was picking off those Casa bombshells like a vixen protecting the bins from a roving predators. And can exhausted looking Joey, who's just deflated and looks like he's literally lost the plot. Can he muster the energy for one last love triangle? Joey really did look like a man who mislaid next week's script as he started trying kind of to reboot his love triangle with Grace and Jesse via some facial gurning that didn't make a lot of sense as Grace returned with her own man mountain. And then we had Ao, who was using word salads to try and pose as the victim rather than the lover after cheating on, I'm not going to say poor Mimi because she doesn't want sympathy, but cheating on Mimi. Uma's now on a slow burn pain path with Will, as she will inevitably be hearing all about his Casa exploits in gory detail. And I think this desperately needs to be the year when Love Island changes the rules and allows Uma and Mimi to win as a friendship couple. Jess is now using her zombie eye gesture more frequently. And that's where she rolls her eyes in a sort of superiority ritual while keeping the lids open so we get just the whites of the eyes showing. It's kind of her warrior tell. And now that she's returned, rebooted like the Queen Bee with her body language, with this trophy guy in Hugo, who Matilda had already made a successful move on in Casa, so maybe not quite the trophy she was wanting. She's likely to be less bee and more Cobra as she picks her enemies off one by one. And misnaming Trey to put him in his place, that was just her first step.
Very deepish, Trey. Trey.
She's calling out moves like she's playing chess, and I think Matilda might be one rival Queen Bee too many for her. This is looking like a player too. Blake doesn't look like her ideal romantic match, but he was clearly the alpha blow to Joey's solar plexus that she's been searching for. And she got her award in Joey's prolonged facial gurning that did suggest jealousy and anger. As Grace sat down, she was using preening gestures to show that she'd kind of won that round. And she threw him one long, hard glance. Joey had foretelling gestures that suggested he might have been hurt. Firstly, he pursed his lips with a lower lip jut, which looked like a sulk. Then he sucked his lips inward, which is a gesture of regret. He avoided eye contact with Grace. And then lastly, he closed his eyes as though he was trying to shut out what he was seeing. Uma and Will, watching Uma's explosion of bouncing, squealing, delight at seeing Will sitting there. She didn't even notice the guys' faces who were all smirking and all we know what he's been up to. But she saw Will sitting solo, and it only made the way that that happy expression melted like wax on hearing about his bed kissing route, that not kissing beds, kissing in bed, that he'd been taking to there. That made it even sadder to watch the change in body language mood. Will had gone through the punnet to choose the best strawberry, or so he thought, which he saw as a virtue. But Uma didn't, clearly, why would she? And the eyebrow flash, it's a micro gesture, but that eyebrow flash that she gave him, along with the coldest, most theatrical cheek kiss as she went to sit down with him, showed inner disdain. When she sat with him, she was using body bristling gestures. There was a more aggressive hair preen, and then some facial wincing that showed that the penny was beginning to drop as what he might have done in there. She's still processing any anger. Will performed, and watch out for Will, he performed a double pit bear when they were chatting afterwards. He sat with his hands behind his head, baring both armpits. Now, this shows arrogance. He also rubbed his face as well as a signal of dismissal. And those signals make me imagine that it's not her corner. He's not feeling the guilt. I'm seeing arrogance for him rather than guilt going on there. So I do feel very sorry for her. Mimi's body language was a masterclass in suppression and elegance, which only made it more painful to watch. She smiled when she came out and saw him sitting with her love rival. She even complimented Maya, although the way that her legs were crossed as she was standing, they were crossed at the ankle as she was standing alone, and that did suggest the inner vulnerability that she must have been feeling and a desire to self-protect, despite the rueful projectile laughs that she let out. There were a couple little explosive laughs as though maybe she didn't expect any better. When she sat for her chat with him, she even managed to cross her leg towards him. She put an elbow on the seat. She used eye contact. All suggestions of a kind of polite amicability. And, well done her for acting like the grown up at that point. And she then had to sit there while he delivered his worst word salad to date. He was even trying to make it look as though it was her dumping him at one point. I mean, massive boo, I'm afraid, for that one. He's all facial expressions of mock bewilderment, wide eyes, confusion, and then he started dropping his head in a kind of miserable pose to imply that he's the true victim. And guess what? It got reward. He started to get reassurance rituals from the other guy. We've got your back. Yeah, I think we've all got his back, but maybe not in the way that he thinks. His very performed displays of mock victimhood at that time contrasted so strongly with the way that elegant Mimi took herself outside. She did not display in Love Island public. She went outside the villa entrance and she sat there to think and reflect. And he just seems arrogant enough now to try and encourage her to fight for him and get into a gruesome love triangle. Bombshell Jess might have looked sweet to him in Casa, but if he's going to keep his own ego and his good guy, which he thinks he is, self-perception intact, he's probably going to have to cast her as the evil temptress who lured him away from his one true love. And that's going to leave her, unfortunately, just as vulnerable as Mimi.